in Gori now. This is a small town in East Georgia, quite close to Tbilisi. A few years ago it was very hard for me to imagine that I would feel so connected to this town one day because of the events which took place here a few years ago.
And right now we are standing in front of the house which was bombed by Russians exactly 12 years ago, like this one.
And I guess the whole world saw the videos and photos from this place and exactly of these buildings which are behind us right now. When I look back and start thinking about the Russia-Georgia War of 2008, I realized that this became the war of our generation because this is the war where our friends, our classmates were taken. And of course I'm not surprised that these events had a huge influence on Georgian literature as well, in particular on the texts of young Georgian authors. And very important that so many really interesting texts were created based on these real events. This includes prose, poetry, also documentary prose. And I think that both of us are among the people who were influenced by the War of 2008.
And I think it's very important because all these books, it's like part of the history. It's like something what next generation will have, like people who don't know about what is happening. They can just look and just read books, look at the photos, and to understand what was happening in their country.
Of course, I mean, Georgian literature has always been a mirror of the real life of this country and its history. So somehow I'm very glad that our generation also continues this path and Georgian literature stays very close to Georgian people. Maybe we can say a couple of words about our book. Actually, this is the topic which is very important for both of us because I'm involved, for example, in women's rights activism for many years already, and this is a kind of a part of my daily life, actually, to work with women, to listen to them, to know their stories, and maybe this is the reason why this book became so personal for both of us. I was so lucky that you came to me with this idea, and we started
very lucky to work with you as well.
And we started searching for these women who had incredible stories, and we actually included around 60 women in our book, and in my opinion, all of them deserve the novel of their own, because all of them are so unique and all of them had gone through so many things. And their war is not over yet, actually, because of the creeping occupation, because of the sorrow they have inside them because of losing their loved ones, their husbands, their children, and maybe because of the hope they have as well. Hope of returning to their houses, to their villages. I mean, sometimes I think that when we're talking about occupation, it's not only about the land, but also somehow our hopes and dreams are also occupied together with our lands. So what I really, really want for the Sheroes of our book is to fulfill and free their hopes and dreams.
So, hello and welcome to the Festival of the Writers' House, where this year's main topic is the fulfillment of a centenary of Russian occupation of Georgia. So exactly 100 years ago in 1921, the Russians, or more precisely the Soviet Russians, ended the first Georgian Republic that was established in 1918. But this year, 2021, also marks the 30th anniversary of Georgian independence, although there is still a silent war, I think one could say, going on between the Russians and the Georgians coming from Russia. But still, this is the anniversary, and the independence was harshly attacked also during the 5-day war in 2008. I think a lot of us will remember this year. So this panel especially wants to give a small insight into the huge amount of often untold women's stories through the history of independent Georgia. Or to be more precise again, the writer Salome Benidze will tell us what she found out as a journalist, a political scientist, as a writer and a women's activist about the role, the fate, and the unknown heroic women of Georgia living, working, and fighting in the shadows of the fighting, drinking, beating, and ruling men in their country. This is maybe a little bit polemic, but let's face it, it's not so easy, I guess, as women still today in Georgia. So we gave this panel the title Sheroes, which simply is the wonderful title of the wonderful book of our guest Salome Benidze, which she did together with a photographer, Dina Oganova, which unfortunately can't be with us today. Sorry about this, but you can buy the book Sheroes. It was published in 2018. And it was also published in German. And as I guess we have some German viewers also, the title of the German translation of this book is exactly not Sheroes, I don't know why, but it is Nicht mal die Vögel fliegen mehr dort, meaning something like not even the birds are flying over there. So it was published last year, I think, in the Aviva Verlag, where you can still buy this really wonderful book. The book Sheroes has received the Litera Award and was also nominated for the Saba Award. So it was already very successful. And maybe coming to Salome to say some words about her. She was born 1986 in, I hope I spell all these names all right, in Kutaisi. She studied journalism and political science in Tbilisi, Vilnius, and Thessaloniki. As I said, she's a fiction writer. She's a political Scientologist and an activist for human and especially women's rights. She received the Saba Award for her debut novel in 2012 and also was rewarded for her collection of stories. So, Salome, hello. Nice
Good
to have you
evening.
here.
Hello, Doris. Thank you very much for the introduction. And I'm very glad to be a part of this wonderful festival, which is unfortunately online, but at some point it also gives us more opportunities to reach wider audience with the topics we want to cover. And thanks for introducing me to the public. And yes, as you mentioned very correctly, my life actually has been very much related to women's rights. And currently I work as a communication specialist. And being a communication specialist who tries to somehow communicate human rights and women's rights and make more people aware of these issues, I can say that I have a very interesting and challenging things to do. And also I think that my writings benefit from this, my everyday life and job very much. And this is very interesting for me to have this kind of, I don't know, double life of a writer and a communication specialist. And I really do my best to combine these two. This is a very important year, actually, for our country as we mark the anniversary of the restoration of our independence. And I really, really do remember those days and how happy my family members were when this important event for our country was declared. Of course, I was 5 years old or maybe less, but I really remember the happiness of my mother, and I understood how important it was for all of us, for the people who were fighting for their independence and for their freedom for many years and even more for centuries. And we are really the country which understands what independence means and sometimes what can be the price of this independence. So as you mentioned, the stories of women are often hidden behind the stories of men and behind the pages of big books which tell us about heroes but not sheroes. So when a few years ago the idea of doing this book came to Dina's mind, who is the co-author of this book together with me, and she's a brilliant photographer and a very close friend of mine. On the same time, I was very happy to join her initiative and to do this book together, because we decided that we wanted to tell the story which was untold for the years, and we decided that we would find women who had experienced the war of 2008, Russia-Georgia war, which is often called 5 days war, but I do not really agree with this definition, because for me, this war took much longer. And even though we don't have any official conflict, armed conflict right now, I think that in many terms, this is still going on because we have this creeping occupation, which is somehow, it's really strange, but it has become a part of our everyday life. And it has become a terrible part of those people's life who live close to the so-called administrative border. And I think that this was somehow a lifetime project for both of us, because we met many extraordinary women who had to tell very interesting stories, tragic stories, because you know how it happens when you're listening to the people who have overcome this kind of tragedies. Many of them have lost their children, husbands, their houses, but they also on the time set perfect examples how you should go on and start your life from the very beginning, from the ashes, even when you have lost the most important people and things in your life. So for me, as a writer, it was an extraordinary experience. I think that we met the women who deserve their own novels, each of them, and who inspired my work and my writings a lot. And I am very glad, and I think both of us are very glad that this book was not left without an attention from professional circles as well as the readers, because we think that these women really deserve recognition. And that was just our mission, to be the mediums between these wonderful women and the audience, because we think that there are much more stories behind the ones which we showed in our book. And this is something which should be paid more attention in the future as well, because it's really, really interesting what kind of role women have in this kind of situations. They are not soldiers most of times, but they do the things which sometimes decide how will everything go. And I'm very glad that we succeeded and managed to bring their stories to the light, and not only in Georgia.
Thank you, Salome. Maybe as we also do this for an audience outside of Georgia, and I don't know if everybody really exactly knows the region where this happened and where the women are now living. When I understood it right, they were now I'm losing the English word for vertrieben.
They were displaced, some of them.
Yes. So can you describe a little bit from where did these women came? Where did you find them? How did you start to work? Where did you go? To which places?
Yes, thank you, Doris, for this question, because sometimes I really forget that many people do not know about it, because this is a part of our everyday life. And this is a really small region, which is called sometimes South Ossetia, sometimes called the Samachablo region. This is in the eastern part of Georgia, close to the Gori town, which is famous for one reason, which I don't like, but I have to say it because I am sure that most of people might know this name. Stalin was born in Gori, so the region where all these events took place is the region where Stalin was born and raised. The beginning of this situation, of this conflict, dates back to early 90s, and I also remember the first war, let's say, which took place in 90s, and when Georgia lost its control on most of territories of this region. And in 2008, when we were already students, my generation, and I was studying abroad, and I was watching all these things from far away, which was very, very difficult for me. And I felt somehow really guilty for being abroad and for being very safe when the people I love most of all were not in a good situation, let's say. We lost more territories in 2008. And the women who are Sheroes of our book, some of them have been displaced from their native villages. Some of them are mothers and wives of the soldiers who fought in this war, and some of these women live in the settlements for IDPs, internally displaced people. And it was very interesting to see how they managed to create new homes for themselves and their families. But on the same time, even though they know that most of them know that their houses and their villages do not exist anymore after this war, I'm sure that most of them still hope that they will go back and build up their houses from the ashes and start everything from the beginning. And this is incredible, how they live with this hope and with this thoughts. Many women in our book are also from the bordering, so-called bordering villages. And one of them says in her interview that we are soldiers here without the uniforms. And this is so right, because these women who live, I don't know, maybe 10 meters away from the block posts, somehow they are the peacekeepers there, and they are kind of a guarantee for the whole country that the creeping occupation will not go really far. And what makes me always really, I don't know, this is such an interesting phenomena for me, that this is happening really, really not far away from Tbilisi. This is happening in, I don't know, 40 kilometers from Tbilisi. And in these terms, Georgia somehow is a very controversial country, that on one hand you have Tbilisi, for example, and other big cities with their nightlife and nice restaurants and people going out and living their lives and enjoying their lives. And 40 kilometers from all this, I don't know, happiness and sometimes even luxury, you have creeping occupation, and you have these women and their families who live with this. And even though I knew many of them because of my job, I had known them before, it was really interesting to enter their homes. And we are extremely grateful to them that they let us in their lives, and they shared their experience, shared their tragedies. And you know, this is not easy when strangers come and ask you about the events which changed your life completely. I mean, we are extremely grateful to them. And with many of them, we still have really close contacts and connection, and sometimes even visit them and call each other and so on. And what many of them told us when we approached them was that, oh, you are the first ones who came to us with these questions about our days during the conflict. And you also find many women in our book who were really young in early 90s, and they were already mothers in 2008. So they have experienced really a lot, from the first conflicts till today, the creeping occupation, and this is their whole life. And yes, I think that even for us, it's kind of, for many people who live in other regions of the country, even though Georgia is a really small country, sometimes even we forget about them if anything does not happen. And we do not realize how their everyday life looks like. And one thing what we also wanted to do with this book was to remind to ourselves and remind other people around us about this situation, because we believe that only the anniversaries of the war are not the days where we should remember what happened to us in the nearest past.
Thank you, Salome. I will now try to share my desktop so we can see maybe some of the photos who are in the book. Even the photographer Dina is now not here, but maybe you can speak to us a little bit. I will try. I hope it works. Here. Well, this is, I think, the opening picture.
Yes.
We see, I guess, I don't know which of the hills of the Kaukasus is this. Do you know that?
Not exactly, but they look beautiful.
Yes. So this is just, well, it starts here where we can see with the, I don't
Yes,
know.
Laura, yeah, it's her name. She was a child when the war took place, but she remembered everything, and she was telling the details so precisely, and so, I mean, she had such a good memory of her childhood house. That was so impressive. And I remembered her words about her village. What she said was that I'm sure that if there is a paradise anywhere in this world, this is my village, which has been completely destroyed, actually. And that was amazing how this young woman already, how she never loses the hope of going back to her home, to her childhood home, which does not exist anymore, actually. Even though she is a student already, and she travels and she studies and she has been abroad and so on, but she still has one paradise, and that was very, very impressive for me, because also my family comes from Abkhazia, my father's family, and this is also very personal for me, being a child of an internally displaced family, and I barely remember my grandparents' house in Abkhazia. And also my father is buried there. And when I listen to this kind of stories, this is very personal to me. And when I'm thinking about our project and the book, somehow I feel that my work, which I did, was a kind of a tribute to my grandmother and all the women who lost their children and houses because of those armed conflict which Georgia has experienced in the last 30 years.
Just a question. We see her in her new village. So is this the house where she lives now?
We see her in her new village. It's a kind of a settlement for IDPs, which was built especially for the people who became internally displaced because of this 2008 war. And this house, there are, I guess, 5 or 6 this kind of settlements. And you can see some of them when you go to the west from Tbilisi. So you go there and you see, you go on your vacations, for example, to the seaside, and you see these houses, which look completely the same somehow, but you also see how people try to add their own details and how to somehow to decorate their small, really tiny yards, and how to make their footprints there. And this is really touching. And I think that somehow these locations for these settlements are also very well chosen, because you can't really go anywhere without seeing them. And this is also a kind of a reminder to me of these events.
But it actually, she looks very, very interesting and very nice. But the scene is very sad. It doesn't look like a happy place.
Yeah, it does not. But actually, I don't know. It's really interesting how these people who live in these settlements see themselves there. And also there were very interesting details about the graveyards, because these places were not villages, that they just built these houses on the valleys, the state, with help of international donors. And of course, there was no graveyard before. And many of women also pay their attention to this tale, how the graveyard started growing there. Mm-hmm. And also, of course, there were no schools there before, no kindergartens, and how they started everything from the very beginning, and how many of them organized themselves as well, and started, I don't know, community organizations to help each other, to help children, because as you might imagine, many of them had really serious psychological problems. And a country like Georgia really does not have enough resources for fighting with all the consequences and results. So these women very often had to organize themselves and start community organizations, social enterprises, and many other initiatives, which became quite successful lately. And I think this says so much about them and the way they live and see their lives.
Mm-hmm. So let's move a little bit forward. I hope we can see another. Yeah, we have this one here, which looks very interesting.
Yes.
It's this one. I will have to. Well, it's an ensemble, no? It's all together. It's what is this? Mm-hmm.
I remember those houses which are on the photos there. These are from the so-called bordering villages, and these houses are under Georgia, under Georgia-controlled territories. Some of them, but some of them are destroyed, and some of them are the ones where the people live. And in villages, it is very strange that these houses have been destroyed, but the owners of the houses live in the same village, but in different buildings. For example, we met the families which live in the buildings of kindergartens and schools, and they see their destroyed houses in, I don't know, 200 from their current shelters, let's say, because you can't really call it a house when you live in the kindergarten and you don't have proper conditions for living. So I remember correctly, these houses are houses which are on the pictures.
Mm-hmm. And this is in the near of this state border region.
Yes.
You can see here. Also this.
Yes.
Well, and then there's a new woman, Liana.
Yeah, Liana Chlachidze, who is an extraordinary woman, really. She lives, I don't know, maybe in 20 meters from the so-called administrative border. And in her house, which was almost destroyed, she started a museum of war. And it's a very interesting place. It keeps a lot of memories, and she hosts many visitors, internal and international as well. And the museum also hosts many interesting events. And the very first presentation of our book was also held in the Museum of War, from 20 meters from the so-called border. And it was very, very sentimental for us, because also Liana was one of the first women we interviewed, and I remember the night when we went to her, when we went to Ergneti village, which is a beautiful village, and you can see Tskhin Valley, which is a central town of the region, and which is not under our control currently. And we can see Tskhin Valley from her yard and balcony. And she was studying there, and she has spent many happy years in Tskhin Valley. And I can imagine how it feels for her to watch it every day, not being able to go there. Because for me also, when I visit her, sometimes it's really, really moving when I see the whole view of the town.
So, I mean, a question to your writings. How did you do it? The one thing is taking the photographs, but the other thing is after you talk to these ladies, to the girls, the different stories they had. How did you write this down? Did you do it by your own style? Because all the texts are very they are very strong, but at the same time they are not very emotional in the sense of flourishing big words.
Yes.
Very,
yes. Yeah, that was a very hard decision for me, how to do it, frankly, because some point I wanted to keep the dialect. On the other hand, I decided to do it on my way and my language, because I wanted the text to be as readable as possible for many people. And I know that sometimes, I don't know, dialect is a very interesting thing for literature, for researchers, and it has very important value. But sometimes I know that it can be sometimes a barrier for people. So I decided that I would do it on my own way. I would, of course, I kept facts, I kept everything. It's a documentary book, and as a person who actually is not a journalist anymore, but has studied journalism, that was very important for me to do everything as accurate as possible. But the language is mine. That was a very hard decision, but somehow I decided to do so.
And did the ladies read your text before you published it?
Not before, but all of them has a copy of the book, and I think they are very happy and very proud to be there. And because we keep them informed about the success and the progress of the book, and we invited them to all the events we had in Georgia, and I think they are very, very happy to be there.
And did you have a chance to presentate the book in their region, in these settlements?
Yes, we did it, as I told you, in Ergneti, and we did it also in Gori, not in every settlement, but as the settlements are close to Gori, we did it in Gori, and many of them came, and it was very nice to have them there. And yes, this is yet another story of another young woman, Nina, who was on the previous photo. And this is, I think, this is a sign of the somehow hospitality as well. How the, I mean, all of them, all the families where we went were really trying to host us and to be as friendly as possible with us. And I think this is the reason why we have this kind of photos in the book as well, to show their everyday life and everything.
And I already mentioned it in the beginning. The book also received awards. And how was it received in the public, let's say in the media, or I don't know if there's any Russian paper who wrote about it, or the Russian neighbors somewhere. Did you have a chance to get feedback from them?
No, not really, but it had really great coverage in Georgian media, televisions, online media, which is very popular in the country. So it is, I think it is still in the center of attention quite often. And we are very happy for that. And it was also the 10th anniversary from the war when the book was published, and also this helped. This played a huge role, I guess. But still, after three years, it is still quite often in the center of media attention.
Mm-hmm. And maybe in the last minutes maybe we can try to speak a little bit in general terms, coming from your book, coming from the stories of women's, which are so often untold, not only in Georgia, but this is a very special situation. How do you see, let's say, the development of women's rights, of equality, of gender equality in Georgia? Let's say from the beginning of the independence in 1991, you mentioned before that you remember your mother. I think you mentioned it on purpose, that she was especially happy about the independence. Was it also because she was happy about her independence as a woman? And yeah, how do you see the development of women's rights in Georgia?
Thank you for this question, Doris. This is a very important question for me, as I identify myself as a feminist. I mean, I know many women who are feminists, but don't identify themselves as one. But I do identify myself as a feminist, and I think Georgia in general is a country of brave, strong, beautiful and smart women. We somehow, when we are talking about women's role in the history of Georgia, we start from very far, like King Tamar from the 20th century, but I won't start from there. I will start from the First Republic, because the fact that we had 5 elected women in our first parliament, which took place from 1918 to 1921, we had 5 women, 5 really inspiring women with great education, great political career, and unfortunately with very tragic stories. And their stories still make us inspired, I think, the whole country, and for me especially, because what makes me somehow really proud very often is that I graduated from a school which used to be a women's school a century ago. So 2 out of those 5 extraordinary women graduated from the same school a century and even more ago, and their names are really, really precious to me. What I really want to do one day is to do a graphic novel about them. And this is the first time I'm telling it.
Wow.
I was keeping it for myself as a secret, but they are huge inspiration for me. And I was very happy to see in the National Archive a few years ago that most of the political parties which took part in the elections had women in their lists. Mm-hmm. And those women were politically very active. So women's political participation is kind of a tradition for us. And sometimes now when these radical people say that this is something artificial for Georgia to have women in politics, and women should know their place, and their place is at home. This is really ridiculous in our situation, because we can say that this has always been a part of our political culture, our social life. Well, as a woman, as a Georgian woman, I'm very proud to be a carrier of this legacy, the legacy they left to us. And unfortunately, their names had been somehow forgotten because of the Soviet Union and 70 years of being a part of the Soviet regime. But I'm very glad that they are much more honored now, and their names are also remembered. I would say the same about, more or less the same about literature, because we had really wonderful women female writers and poets. And somehow now I have the feeling that we are rediscovering them, and we're rethinking their work. And I'm very glad that many Georgian publishing houses are initiating republishing of their books, which have not been published for decades. And I'm very glad for that. I'm also very glad that the voice of Georgian women now is very loud in any sphere of social life, including literature. And I'm happy to be a part of this process. Actually, in this regard, I don't really like to be an exception. I would never want to be an exception as a woman who did whatever she wanted in her life. But I would love to be one of many women who succeeded and who fulfilled their dreams, I would say. And this is very important to me. Georgian women's movement is quite strong. Now they advocate for many important and crucial things, including gender-based violence and women's empowerment. And I would underline the empowerment of adolescent girls and young women, which is very important, I think, if we want to develop as a society, and if we want to find our place finally on the world map, we have to invest in adolescent girls. This is my opinion. And we have to invest in young generation and young women in particular. And as a teacher who works for 2 universities in Georgia, and mostly has female students, because I teach public relations, and somehow I have my majority of my students are women, young and promising women. I think that I try my best to be someone who tries to explain to them yourself, because feminism and women's empowerment, in my opinion, is not about going to army or driving heavy vehicles. It's about choices. It's about rights and choices. So this is what I try to explain to my students quite often. I teach communications for NGOs and international organizations, but I think that I I pay a lot of attention to these issues also during my classes. And I'm very happy when I see my previous students being interested in women's rights, working for NGOs and so on, because we really need this. And I'm very glad that I think that Georgia is on the right way in this regard, even though gender-based violence, early marriage, forced marriages still remain huge problem, and many families as well. And even though the women's political participation is still very low in the country, despite the measures we have taken, even though we have many challenges, we are facing many challenges as women, and sometimes we even face the challenge of our body belonging to us. I mean, this is sometimes under the question mark in this country. I think that we have made very important decisions. We have made the decision that Georgian women will never take the second place in our society. And this is very important to me. And I think that Georgian literature plays very important role as well in this process, because we have really, really brilliant female writers now who are published and who are the best-selling authors. I'm saying this very proudly, and I think that their texts encourage young girls and women a lot to fight for their rights and make their own choices. Because, you know, this is very important. For many centuries, women saw themselves in the books written by men, and the women in those books were kind of women men would want to see. And it is very important to read the books which are written by women, and which show the women how they are in real lives and how they see themselves. And I think that this wave is very healthy, and it is unstoppable at the moment. This is how I see it, and this makes me really, really happy and proud.
Wow, Salome. This is an end of the panel I wouldn't have imagined. Thank you very much for your encouraging words in Georgia. I had the chance, or we in Germany had the chance to at least some of these also young female writers were translated in the context of the book fair 2000 and I think it was 18.
Yes, it was 18.
19, I'm sorry, when Georgia was a guest of honor in Frankfurt. And we very much enjoyed reading these books, especially from the ladies. So we had a little insight. I hope a lot more books are being translated into Georgian. Also hope a lot more people. And I very, very much hope that you really will do this graphic novel about your female Georgian heroes. That would be very nice, also to read it in German. So our time is over. I thank you very much. And I also thank the Writers' House, or the girls behind the Writers' House.
Yes, this is a very important thing. I also want to underline that there were Sheroes behind the guest of honor program at Frankfurt Book Fair. And I also, sorry for interruption, but I also want to thank them with my whole heart for the huge work they are doing. This is very important for us. And I think that they set the highest standard in this country. And this makes me also very happy as a writer.
Definitely. No words, because and I think everybody in Germany who likes books, who reads books, who was sharing this imagine of these strong women. It was an all women's, all female. There were some boys, but it was actually an all female team still working. So thank you very much, and hope to see you soon in another phase of our lives, maybe personal, after pandemics is over. Thank you very much, Salome.
Thank you very much, Doris.
So, wow, Salome, I didn't expect this happy ending of our panel. Thank you very, very much.
I always try to be optimistic. I mean, even though we have many challenges, I really try to keep optimistic mood.
Thank you for your really encouraging words, and I have to underline it because we in Germany we still have the chance to read some of the female authors who were translated in the context when Georgia was guest of honor in Frankfurt in 2019. So I hope we will still continue to read these young, especially young female writers. And I want to thank also all the girls behind the organization who were organizing the guest of honor program, but also still going on working as we see it today. So thank you very much at the Writers' House and the girls there.
Thank you very much from my side as well. Many thanks to the Writers' House and real Sheroes in the team, because they set very high standards in this country, and I'm very happy to be part of this really historic event and opening the window for Georgian literature to Europe. It is really amazing what they have done.
Definitely. Well, thank you, Salome, and I also hope we will read your graphic novel you mentioned before about your female Georgian heroes, and I hope it will be translated. I'm very sure once it is published, it will be translated in German. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Doris.